Hello and welcome to 10 Lessons Learned, where we discern wisdom for business, career and life. In other words, valuable lessons that you won't find in a textbook because it took us years to learn this stuff. My name is Jeffery Wang and your host today. I'm the founder of the Professional Development Forum, which helps diverse young professionals find fulfillment in the workplace. Today we're joined by Suet Koon Lai, or better known as Koon, who has appeared in a PDF podcast in the past, but I would really like her to come and share her 10 lessons because I believe that her story has a lot of unique wisdoms that I think will appeal to our audience. Now, I'm going to read out your official bio and I'm going to go through and get you to tell us the real story. The official bio that Koon gave me is that she is an executive coach with over 2 decades of leadership experience at one of Australia's largest global consulting firms. She brings a wealth of real-life experience to support leaders through a holistic approach that combines practical insights with transformative coaching techniques. She has made significant strides in advancing numerous multicultural leaders, helping them unlock their full potential and overcome systemic barriers. Koon's clients value her whole person approach, which helps them develop authentic leadership skills both in their professional and personal lives.
Pretty long.
Yeah, it is pretty long. Look, it's all a lot of big words, a lot to unpack there. But who are you, and what led you to what you do today?
Very good question. So maybe then I kind of share more like me as a person. So I grew up in Malaysia. And growing up in Malaysia, from the get-go, I don't know if people know this, but Malaysia, like racism and discrimination is overt.
Oh yeah, it's in the constitution.
It's in the constitution. And so as a young child, I always already knew that how my country treat me is going to be different to how it's going to treat my best friend, all right, who is a Malay. There was no resentment for that. It was just like, I know. And that really spurred me in terms of, this is what I've been given. So what will I do about it? And studying hard was almost like that ticket out.
Yep.
And in my, like, not only like Asian tiger parents, right? You added on top of that the discrimination and racism of your home country, and it really spurs you on. And so for me, studying hard was the escape from that situation. It was the way out.
And you carried that over to Australia?
So that also then gave me a lot of, I was always arguing with my father, I remember, about the injustice of it. And the advice I got was, don't be bitter, be better. Okay. And I suppose inside of that kind of the kind of like fighting the injustice for something that stayed with me. And eventually that studying hard did get me into a university in Australia. It has also meant that studying hard, I was in a Malay school, so that Malay was the main language.
Sure.
And English was maybe like half an hour in a week, so it's not a lot. But my parents knew that because I'm not going to be able to go into a local university, that I have to be like learning English. My parents are Mandarin educated. My grandparents speak Hokkien. In school, you got half an hour of English. And then in the space, you speak Cantonese. So I did come with a bit of like chip on the shoulder that, oh, my English is not very good. And going to uni, I did comm law, and then you see the smartest of the smartest in Australia. And that also compounded the pressure. And because you're coming in as an international student, you almost feel like you got to prove that your parents' sacrifice was worth it. And from that is like trying to find a job as well. And that was really hard because unless you have a PR, you're just not going to get a job.
Sure. And then so did you end up finding a job?
No, not in Australia. But there was a lady and she was and this is the part about learning to tell your story. And I met her just before I was going to start uni. And I was telling her my story and why studying overseas was going to be important. It was that ticket out. And it turns out that she was actually the officer who will process scholarship application.
Okay. That was fortunate.
So she put forth my application, and because of that scholarship from Melbourne Uni was how I ended up being in Australia. And that was the same lady when I couldn't get the job in Australia. I told her, and she said, "Oh, I know somebody who knows a partner of a law firm in Malaysia. Maybe you guys can have a chat."
Oh.
And that was how then I got the job in Malaysia. At the same time, I did have a job offer from PwC Singapore. And that's how I ended up in Singapore and then moving back to Australia because my husband, also my first boyfriend that I met in uni, like he proposed. So that's how I ended up in Australia. So it's a long-winded way, and then I ended up staying in that same organization for 20 years.
Right. Okay.
And in that time has its challenges as well. Then had the kids, and I got 3 boys. Started creating content on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And from
that's
that,
where you got a lot of attention because you are a very gifted storyteller.
which I didn't even realize, because I was still that story early on where I said English really wasn't my first language. I had a lot of fear about it, but I took it as a learning journey. But it opened up doors in ways that I could not have imagined.
And we will unpack that. So how Koon came from someone of pretty humble beginnings who struggled with English to become who you are today, who is actually coaching some of the most up-and-coming leaders from multicultural background here in Australia. And it's so interesting because I really get taken back by the authenticity in the way you write. So clearly this is how I noticed you in the first place. And that's why I invited you to have that first podcast. Now, clearly you don't fit in a box, or at least not anymore. And when I asked you to draft up 10 lessons learned, what you gave me was 10 lessons you've unlearned, which actually takes away our usual curveball that we throw at you. But so what we got here is 10 lessons unlearned with Koon. And lesson number 1, you said, don't follow the herd. Stand out. What do you mean by don't follow the herd?
That really came from me, that early days in my career in Australia, where I really felt the pressure to contort myself to fit into a box. And having to learn then the next 10 years to uncontort myself, that the rules of engagement to succeed, like all the advice that maybe work for the majority, but for somebody with my background, English is not my first language, the perception of what is charisma and what is presence, I just don't have that look. And if I were to take on those advice and then follow the herd, follow the crowd, it would have been a real hard struggle. Instead, what I've learned was to be different, to do something that other people are not doing.
Yep.
And by doing that, I'm actually going to create a lot more opportunities for myself because I'm not following what everybody else is doing. I'm not competing for the same thing.
Oh, 100%. Look, I take 2 points with that, right? The first one is that if you're trying to fit in, you're trying to copy your stereotypical charismatic leader, you'll just come across as just all wrong, inauthentic, you're nothing you do, because all you're doing is trying to be a lesser version of somebody else. And there's nothing unique about you in a way that would be memorable. Doing you is good. But the second point I'll take from that is, in fact, probably more of a question back to you, is how do you, a lot of us don't have the confidence to just be ourselves, right? Because of all these programming that you had earlier in your life, somehow you're told to suppress that authenticity. So how did you find the courage to essentially do you?
I think I kind of, I felt like it was tiring to try to be like everybody else. And that really came at that juncture where I made a choice that I wasn't going to defer having children. I love kids and I want to have kids early in my life. So that was one point that I didn't want to follow what everybody else was doing. And that then came with consequences. The career plateaued. And because I made a choice to do what's important to me, and work-wise, it was also very challenging because I couldn't do the long hours that everybody else was able to do. 6 o'clock, I have to be out and I have to go and do childcare pickup. And that then come with like judgment of others that I'm no longer ambitious or serious with my career. And so then I started looking for different roles. And there was 2 roles, a safe role of doing learning and development, which I love, and I've done it before. The other role was a transformation role, which is back then so new and just now is ubiquitous. Everyone talks about it, but then it was so new that the hiring manager said to me, this role could be made redundant. And I was like, I remember an advice from one of my closest friends who then said to me, it's not the job that create you your opportunities, it's you creating your own opportunities. And I said yes to that role. I really created all the new job description for myself. And in that time, then shape it in a way that is more like true to me, that it's going to work for me and play to my strength. Because I can never compete with others with the long hours. I can't compete with beautiful writing skills like your consulting style writing skill. But I can build lots of relationship with people from different nationalities and different culture.
Right.
As Malaysian, you can code switch
Yeah, very
with different
easily.
people pretty easily because that's what you're used to.
Expected to do, yeah.
And so that role actually allowed me to play to that strength because I was really working a lot with our teams in India and the Philippines and Australia. So it actually was like, you know what? I can play to that. And making that choice to be like different, drawing onto my Malaysianness was actually an asset.
And that's how you found that confidence to
to do what is going to play to my strength rather than it's something that is a weakness and I already have to keep working on it. And the be different is aligning that to more like what comes natural and what gives you energy and the things that, you know, is more your strength than anything else, because the return of investment playing to your strength is much, much higher than the return of investment in the effort that you put in to fix your weaknesses. So it was really like, I'm not going to play the game that everybody else is playing. I'm going to create a new playing field for myself.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So lesson number 2 that you've unlearned is don't network. Be generous, you say.
Yes, I remember somebody saying like, "Oh, Kun, you got to like network," and I always cringe at that word. And the reason for it is because I think underlying that word network is being quite transactional and superficial.
Yeah.
You go to these big events and there's all these people that you don't know, they're all strangers. And it really made me feel very uncomfortable. I'm much more comfortable with one-on-one, meeting with people, helping people. And one day I was with a partner and then he said to me, "Oh, Karen, you're such a good networker." And that really caught me out by surprise. And I'm like, "What do you mean? I don't see myself that way." And he said to me, "That's because every time he meet up with me, there'll be somebody that I'll introduce him to." So what I learned from that was that I didn't have to be like the networking like everybody else, thinking about networking. That if I do my one-on-one, which is what I'm most comfortable with, have that coffee. So I go a formula 1-1-1-1. So if I go to one event, I just need to meet one person to have one coffee with that person. And in that coffee, being generous to that person that I'm talking to, listening to them and understanding them, but also figuring a way out to give. And I find there's 3 ways that I can give to people. And I call it my CIA.
Okay.
Not the spy agency. Is there a connection, C, that I can introduce them to that will help them? Is there an I for information that I can share with them that can help them? Or A, is there an action, something that I can do to help the person? So in if in every conversation I'm giving, I'm not expecting anything, right? I'm just giving. Invariably, you are depositing like goodwill, the social capital.
Yep.
And over time, it is an exponential. And it was something I was doing without realizing. But I suppose if there's a lesson is be generous.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to end up building that social capital, not the networking that you might have
Not
imagined.
the transactional relationships. You're talking about genuine connections.
Genuine connection.
Yeah, real relationships.
Real relationship, right? And real relationship with through like generosity. Not expecting anything, but really sincerely like giving.
Yeah, now that I agree with. Lesson number 3 to be unlearned is don't be confident. Be competent.
The more people tell me to be confident, the more not confident I feel. And this is what they call the high achiever paradox, right? Because the person who knows stuff also know what they don't know. So because they know what they don't know, there's more of this anxiousness that comes with it. Whereas the person who is not very competent, they don't know that they don't know.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, don't tell people to be confident. Focus on competence. Because people mistake confidence for competence.
Yeah.
And we know from real life experience
That's not the case.
that is actually not the case, right? I would rather that person be competent, but they also are aware of what they don't know so that they can go and figure it out.
So are you talking about imposter syndrome? People who feel like they're not as good as they are sort of being judged to be?
Yeah. So the word like syndrome, as if there's something medically wrong with you. But it's actually, but I think like the stats are showing like 70 to 80% of people actually experience that, oh, maybe I'm not as good as what people think.
But how do you know you're competent? Don't you have to be confident in order to know your competence?
When you start becoming more competent, the confidence will come. So there's this thing called the competence framework, right? Everyone always start with unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And at some stage, you'll realize that you are then consciously incompetent.
So you know what you don't know, yeah.
That's where the anxiousness will come in. That's when they call this imposter syndrome, right?
Yep.
But then if you keep working on your competence, you will become consciously competent.
So you know what you're doing.
You know what you're doing. And if you keep taking actions to build your competence, that's where you get to the unconsciously competent. That's
Just
when
comes natural to you.
it will just come natural to you. That's where the confidence come in. And so that is something for people to know, that when you are feeling that anxiousness, not feeling confident, know that you are on this like journey of competence. So you keep working on that competence. Eventually, you will become unconsciously competent.
Gotcha.
And that is the real genuine confidence.
So
right?
by focusing on becoming more competent, you don't worry about, I suppose, a lack of confidence.
Yeah, you got to focus on the competence and work on that competence. And the competence, I don't just mean by the technical competence, I'm also meaning like the people competence.
Right. Okay.
As you progress up,
Soft skills. And
the soft
people
skills,
smarts. Yeah.
yes, because as you progress further up, it's less and less of your technical competence. It's becoming more and more about your people competence. So we got to also start working on the people competence.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Lesson number 4 to unlearn, don't go outside of your comfort zone. Stretch your comfort zone.
Oh, this one. Yes.
It's one of my pet peeves, isn't it?
Yes.
People telling you to get outside of your comfort zone and then you just end up being annoyed.
Because for someone that has left their home country, the comfort of their own home, taking a risk to start all over again in a new country, we are already out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
We are already out of our comfort zone, right? And the piece where I suppose the story that came with it was I was going after this particular role. And in that particular role, I felt like it was like my pathway to success, like to be a partner. And it was really outside of my comfort zone, like really outside of my comfort zone. It was doing on things like blockchain. I'm an auditor by trade, right? And blockchain, what do I know about it? And it was dealing with so many high profile clients. You can even find it in the news, this particular project. And I was supposed to be like the PMO for this project. Really outside of my comfort zone. The people challenges were incredible, the attention on it. And I actually burn out. I was feeling this lack of confidence so much in that period. And all I could see was like the train. I had this image, a train just coming and it's going to hit all of us and it's just going to be an absolute failure. And I had, at that point, they're like, oh, we're supportive of your promotion, like to the next level. And then most people will go, oh, great, all the hard work, finally going to get recognized. At that point in time, all I could think about was suicide.
Oh.
That was how much out of my comfort zone I was. And because I had another person who told me that he went through something similar, I call him up and he's get out of the car right now. So for 6 months, really was in a black hole, trying to dig myself out. And that was when I really learned that, you know what, don't go out of your comfort zone. Because when you go out of your comfort zone, you're not playing to your strength. And when you don't play to your strength, it creates a lot of anxiousness and anxiety that comes with it. But instead, stretch your comfort zone. I go by 80-20. 80% of the time, I'm playing to my strength. And then 20% of the time is where I'm doing my stretch.
Right. And that's where you do your growth.
That's where I do my growth, right? And if incrementally I keep stretching on my 20%, remember the competence framework that I was talking about?
You'll get there,
I will then actually, that 20%, if I keep practicing on it, that become my strength because now I'm unconsciously competent, which then give me another ability to gonna stretch another 20%, another 20%. So when people see, oh, she seemed to be so confident, well, that's because 80% of the time I'm playing to my strength and I'm stretching that other like 20%, whatever that 20% is.
Now that's really good wisdom. So don't just jump into the deep end thinking that that's where you need to be, but play to your strengths so that you've got a good sort of solid base that you can grow from. And then on the 20% of the time, that's when you can stretch yourself.
And you stretch yourself comfortably and you're still growing.
Yeah, and you don't burn yourself out.
Don't burn yourself out. Yeah.
All right, lesson number 5 to be unlearned. Don't speak up. Contribute with substance.
Yes. So there's something about the culture here that always asks people to speak up. But the thing about speaking up is that if you don't speak up, you then get labeled, you're not assertive, you're not confident. But when you do speak up, then you get labeled as, oh, too aggressive, too bossy. And there's a fine line between speaking up and not speaking up. And so that's why it's really hard for people to, when you just tell them the advice, oh, just speak up. It's a thing called the low power double bind. So the low power double bind speaks of when there is differential in power with the other person, the range that you're speaking up get rewarded when it's low power is very narrow. And this came from the research by Adam Galinsky. And it was something that really made me understand why speaking up can be feeling so risky to some people and to myself, right? Because it did happen. I did at one stage speak up because that's what they say, oh, you should speak up. But then I got hauled up for speaking up. And hauled up by 3 senior people, much more senior than me. After being told, oh, you got to speak up, you got to speak up. When I do speak up, then I got hauled up by saying, oh, that was too aggressive. That's not the way to speak.
Right.
You have to flex your leadership style. interesting, right? That me, the junior person, have to flex my leadership style to 3 people who are more senior than me.
But is it how you speak up? Does it make a difference?
Well, I think it's like so there's a few things, right? If you're both on equal, your range where you do speak up is a lot wider, right? But I was female. I was also an Asian female. So there is certain expectation in terms of how I should be acting and speaking. And when I don't fit into that stereotype, it's jarring for the person who is on the receiving end.
Even though what you're saying is correct.
Even if what I'm saying is correct, because in this instance, I was saying like, hey, there are issues here. I was raising like issues.
Right.
And issues that we can then, how do we constructively move from that?
Right.
But instead, I was in a room that I was getting holed up. So me, the junior person, with 3 people pointing their fingers at me. So if you look at that situation, you go, hold on a minute. One, there's really that power differential. And what she's raising is an issue that has an impact. So how to actually constructively work through the issues that she's raised.
So what would you recommend that people do instead then, if you find yourself in that situation?
If I'm on that leader side, to have that awareness, like that is not the way to conduct it. To realize that the power that they have. But for me, that was the lesson that I said to myself, fine. This is, I know that how I say things, I have to do double, triple, like thought in my head, how I'm going to say it. And that's why it's exhausting when for the people that get told, oh, you got to speak up. What they don't realize is how much mental effort they need to make in order to speak up.
Yeah.
So I would still say that I didn't want to be put off by that. And I did have to learn to be more sophisticated in how I raise the issue, the tone that I use to actually make that difference.
Right. So what would you have done instead if you find yourself in the same situation again? What would you recommend that you do?
I think in that situation, I would actually find allies because I didn't have power to call them out. And I would need to have found like allies.
Okay. But your lesson is that you don't speak up, but you contribute with substance. How do you do that when you don't? Because it seems to me like that particular situation, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Then how do you contribute with substance when you whatever you say is almost going to be used against you?
Yeah, that was a situation where there was very little that I could do at that point in time. But that advice, when I got told you got to flex your leadership style, I was like, fine, I will show you how I'm going to flex my leadership style.
But it just sounds like really bad leadership to me.
There's plenty of
bad leadership, but you're not in a position to necessarily call them out. Look, I'm just thinking, is there a lesson that we can draw if you find yourself under bad leadership? That probably isn't a solution other than to get out. But in that particular situation, is there some style that you could have picked that would have had a better outcome?
One of the style, like on reflection, is asking questions. Not every issue has to be like, hey, there's something going on that is wrong here.
Yeah.
Sometimes that style is to ask questions. And when you ask question, you have the other person raise the issue.
So get them on your side. Here's a monkey on your shoulder as well.
Yes.
How do we get out of this?
And the other thing was alignment of interests. Is think about what is it that's going to motivate the other side to do what you need them to do.
Yeah.
And people speak about organizational interests, but I find it more powerful to understand like personal interests.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And that could be a carrot or a stick for them. But figuring out that personal interest and then framing what you're going to say that aligns to their personal interests are more likely to get the traction. So in that situation, I was raising an issue, but it would have made them look really bad.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
So, and they wouldn't want to look bad, right? So I didn't think about that alignment of interest. I was thinking about the interests of the people that I represent when I'm bringing up the issue. But I didn't consider that already there's a power gap. And I was like, wow, they tell me to speak up, I should speak up. And so I did. But then I go, I don't get the same privilege. So I got to do that extra step to think about how am I going to work with where they are coming from. And I know that that's very, isn't that normal? Like everywhere you should always be doing that. But when there's extra power dynamics, there's more that you have to think about. And there's more that how you're going to say it matters.
Is there a way, I mean, other than learning the hard way to get your head chewed off before you can learn how to speak up in a more effective manner?
Building your power.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I was speaking about that, when you're on low power, speaking up is hard.
Yep.
So you can increase your range of power.
Yeah.
And increasing, and this is the thing that Adam speaks about, right? Where to build your power is knowing that what you have that others want. When others want what you can give, you have power. But if you want what others can give, they have power.
That's true. Yeah.
So the more that I build out on my power, and power can come from like me knowing, okay, there is information or knowledge that I have or expertise I have that they're going to need. There's relationship.
Yep.
So expanding that power means that my ability to speak up then actually get rewarded rather than get penalized.
Yep.
So I would say to people, understand your own power and understand how you can expand your power. And that was something I wish I had learned earlier.
Yeah. But I'd argue that's universal in that everyone needs to learn that lesson, not just those with a low power background. I think understanding how power develops in a society, maybe the rules aren't as explicit to people from a non-dominant culture, whereas like people who grew up in that culture learns it by osmosis, being around it and being taught explicitly how that works. Whereas people from a different culture will just have to be a little bit more astute to observe the rules of how that power operates. So I think the lesson there is to become more astute in observing that and accumulate that rather than sort of speaking up and coming across it. But let's move on. Lesson number 6, don't be yourself. Okay, so don't be yourself. You're talking about being authentic, but be your future self.
Yes.
Okay, so not quite this, it's a bit of a curveball there.
A bit of a curveball. What I was finding was like that be yourself. It comes also with a penalty. And if you're
What do you mean comes with a penalty?
Like be myself, for me, would be shorts and t-shirts and wear my slipper. Right. That's a very Malaysian thing to do, right?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
And if I'm just being like myself, it may not necessarily gonna be the self that the workplace is gonna be looking for, or what the other person is looking for, right? And the whole like be yourself also, the more power you have, the more that your authenticity is gonna get rewarded, right? But there's always a part of your authenticity. And the other challenge that I also find with being yourself is sometimes that could limit your growth. Where you might go, no, I'm not going to do that because that's just not me. But what I found useful was actually asking myself, who do I want to be?
Rather than who you are now, who you want to be.
Is who do I want to be? And if having clarity about who I want to be, what is it that I want from my life, then helps me make the decision around, when I'm at a crossroad, what will I choose? And what I say yes to is going to get me closer to who I want to be. And what I say no to is because it's going to take me away from who I want to be. So it's much more like conscious and intentional to be the person that I want to be.
So you can still be authentic, but it's understanding that you are fluid in who you really are. So you're still being authentic, but being to who you want to be rather than who you are right now.
Right now. Because if we think about it like who we are right now, it'll be quite different to who we are like 10
years ago.
But instead of bumbling along with that, is more going, actually, who is the person that I want to be?
And be intentional about it.
And being intentional about it. The person I want to be is like, I want to be the person who is making a difference. It's in terms of how I spend my time and my day.
Yep.
I want to be the person that my kids, my boys are going to choose to want to hang out with me because they want to, not because they have to. What is that then embody, right? Being kind, being caring, say things because it matters, even if it's difficult.
Yep.
So then I'm consciously making those choices to be the person that I want to be.
Yep.
And then that comes with a risk, of course.
100%.
But because it's being the person that I want to be, I'm prepared to accept those risks.
Well, it's character building. This is absolutely the journey
Yeah.
that you have to take. And yeah, it's about making those difficult choices, but it's also being intentional about what those choices are.
Yeah.
I love it. So I like this one. And I know bamboo sealing is one of our topics that we've discussed a lot over the years.
Yes.
Lesson number 7 to unlearn: don't smash the bamboo ceiling. So you're now changing your mind.
Yes.
You're telling us to build your own house instead.
Yes. Build your own house. I think there was an element where I was getting like frustrated by the bamboo ceiling, the glass ceiling. And it was such a hard going to break those ceilings. But then I had, I suppose, that moment where as I was creating content, it started to open doors where people were approaching me and say, hey, can you do coaching, mentoring? And that was after a year of writing. And so I was like, oh, okay, let me see how that goes. So I made it into a social enterprise and kind of see where that takes me. I got to then to a stage where I was like, oh, hold on a minute. I think it's possible. Because by that time as well, I really did feel like there was already a ceiling to my progression. That was the most senior that I could ever be in that organization. And so it was a choice then. If I could stay and be stuck with that ceiling and get frustrated, or take that risk, parachute out, and build my own house. That was really scary to have to think through that. I remember telling my mom about it, and she was like, are you sure you're going to be doing that? You've worked so hard for so long, fought so hard as well, and you're just going to give it up. Her word was like, you're going to give it up. And it did felt like I was giving it up.
Yeah.
And that feeling that I had to reconcile was like, oh, I hit a ceiling.
Yep.
And now I feel like I'm going downward. And I did have to reconcile that. And what I did learn from that was like, actually, I was actually building my own house. And therefore, there's no ceiling.
No, that's true. I'm just going to be a devil's advocate. I mean, the whole concept of the bamboo ceiling or glass ceiling or whatever ceiling is this idea that you believe that these systemic and cultural barriers stops people of merit from ever reaching their potential in these organizations. So isn't the idea of abandoning your quest to smash these bamboo ceilings and glass ceilings and the likes, isn't that kind of just giving up? And you build your own house. Isn't that a bit of a pessimistic? Yeah, it's a bit of a pessimistic way of dealing with it, saying, well, they'll never change. But then doesn't that prevent these organizations from becoming better?
So interestingly, after I left, I ended up with a stronger voice about the bamboo ceiling than I was in the organization. Because when I left, then I could say what I needed to say.
Yeah, but it's still a loss to the organization because you're no longer in it.
Yeah.
I get that it's better for you. And I take where your lesson's coming from, which is that rather than wasting our time trying to change someone that don't want to be changed or some organization don't want to change, but then isn't that giving up on the mission that you believe that these people would be better off or these organizations would be better served if people with merit were to be able to be given the opportunity?
The mission then was broader than the organization. The mission became broader than the organization. Remember, was it early on when I said like external in? If you want to change the organization from within.
Yeah, be so good they can't ignore you.
Be so good that they can't ignore you. Be so influential that they cannot ignore you. So
So you've basically realized that the mission is not necessarily self-advancement. Your mission is a cultural change, which
it's a
is
cultural
much
change.
bigger piece.
Then it goes beyond the organization. Because when I then left, one, it gave me the space to just say what needed to be said
Yeah.
about the ceiling. I'm not constrained by that ceiling in terms of what I can say. And when I'm able to say it in the public space, it actually attracts other allies and other advocates and champions
Yeah.
that we then collaborate and work together in terms of
But
dismantling.
doesn't that just reveal the fact that the organization you're working in had a toxic culture? Doesn't that just absolutely show exactly how bad that organization culture is, that you can't say these things that are obviously
It's not
self-evidently
unique,
true?
but it's not unique to that organization.
Yeah.
It is in every organization that people are afraid to say.
I'd argue that this is societal wide, and unfortunately, I think the problem is actually wider than organization or even on diversity and inclusion. I think the problem is that people are afraid to say things which are inherently true because it comes at their own detriment. But the problem is that when this thing is so pervasive throughout the society, I fear for our future because we can't speak our minds. We can't let the contest of ideas, let the best ideas flow to the top.
And I agree with that. It is so pervasive and it is happening. But where I'm different is that I'm actually more optimistic about it.
Okay.
I'm actually more optimistic about it because I sense that there is now a groundswell movement. Reality is Australia demographics 25% is Asians. That is the reality, right? More than half of Australians are born overseas or have one parent born overseas. That reality is not going to change.
Yep.
And so organization now have to grapple. When I say organization, I'm saying like senior leadership, right? Senior leadership and board that is still predominantly white, homogenous. That is something that they have to grapple with. And they can start to see if they have a photo of their senior leadership team, it's predominantly Anglo-European. And then they take a photo of the rest of their staff, non-Anglo-European.
Yeah, but that in itself alone is not proof that they haven't promoted on merit. I think that the challenge there is that this is the topic of you don't know what you don't know. So the question is, have we made the best use of our human capital in this country?
We definitely haven't. And I would even argue that merit is a myth, right? Merit is a myth because people like to think that the best person gets the job. And it's used to push back against work of diversity and inclusion. And they say it's that if you do diversity, equity, and inclusion, then you're denying the best person for the job.
Yeah.
But in the first place, merit has always been a myth. It's never been the best person for the job. It's who do you know for the job?
It's a perception. It's a function of power rather than competence. I would say that it's probably the truth is somewhere in the middle. There has to be, these hierarchies have to be built on some level of competence.
Correct.
But over time, that definition or understanding of merit and competence has to evolve with the times. And my gut feel, and again, you can't prove this one or the other, is if we have essentially grown this country with this much immigrants and this much human capital and potential to make the best use out of it, I would expect that our senior leadership to somewhat reflect that population, because we're talking about different ideas, different perspectives, different networks, different sort of influences. But unfortunately, the reason why we haven't got that is because we still got a leadership establishment that has failed to take into account the need for this changing world that they have to grapple with outside of Australia. And I would argue that the reason is because we've been so lucky in Australia. We've been blessed with so much natural resources. We're very little geopolitical tensions and conflicts anywhere around us, that we never had to make the best use of our people in order to really do well in this country. Unfortunately, the byproduct of that is that a lot of people who we would regard as potentially great leaders never got the opportunity because they still stuck in the 1950s, 60s mindset of what a great leader looks like.
And I would say to those is you got to be willing to also move. If you feel like in that organization you're already capped, move. That was something I suppose, like for me, on hindsight.
Yeah.
I stayed on. I didn't move because I was like, no, I can still fight this, right? But equally, by the same token, if I didn't stay on, would I have picked up all of the skills that I needed to do what I do now?
Right.
So I think where the difference is now, especially for the younger generation, is the way to succeed is so much more options for them.
You don't necessarily have to follow the traditional path, graduate, follow the career path, and get promoted in your job. You could potentially do a lot. And look, and I think fundamentally I agree with you. I think we're nostalgically connected to or attached to the idea that we can somehow change this rather than building a new house is because 3 of my brightest friends from university just gave up on Australia. Went to Shanghai, Singapore, and Silicon Valley, and doing great things. They never came back.
Yeah.
But the travesty of that is, this could have been people that could have been contributing to the Australian economy, building our innovation, doing great work for us. But because of our inability to really see them for their merited potential, we've lost them to better places around the world.
And I think that's something that Australia do need to grapple with, because if that continues, the younger generation are just going, you know what, if we can't succeed here, there's too many barriers, we have options. We can go to other places that is going to value us. And so that is something that Australia will need to grapple with, because you're right, the complacency comes from, the prosperity of Australia comes from underneath its ground.
Yep.
I would argue that it's actually the humans living above its ground.
It's the people. Yeah, and the irony is that it's not just happening to Asians, right? This has been happening a long time. Just think Crocodile Dundee, think Steve Irwin. It's clear that these brilliant people are appreciated more by people outside of Australia than within Australia.
And then to go back to the organization, sometimes it takes you leaving the organization for the organization to value you. And for you to learn to value yourself.
Yes. Yeah, and I take your advice. As I was saying, I'm emotionally attached to certain things, but I understand why you would say build your own house rather than trying to fix or to smash a bamboo ceiling.
And it's the same with the clients I have, right? At some stage, if you find it too hard, you got to start to go, how am I using my energy here? And if that's the organization that's not going to appreciate, then how do you create options for yourself so that you don't feel this frustration of being stuck?
That's right, yeah.
It's that creating of that option, right? We have our ancestors who created options for themselves. They move.
That's right.
Like they left home, go to a different country and then move again. I move again. My ancestors from China moved to Malaysia because there was a ceiling. Different kind of ceiling, but there was a ceiling. So they left, took a risk. And then I came here because there was a ceiling. But then I know here, and even to my kids now, I say 95 is not something that you have to. You can go and create. And I met this lady, she was so inspirational. She was still in uni. And she's like, I don't have energy to go and fight all this bamboo ceiling. So she go and build her own company.
Yeah.
And then she built it with the people that she don't have to carry the extra emotional mental load of fighting the ceiling because she's just busy building.
That's right. And that is a much more fulfilling life.
Build it so big that others want to join into your house.
That's right. And you can dictate the culture of that. Great lesson. Thanks for sharing that. Great little rabbit hole that we went down.
Yes.
Lesson number 8, though. We've got to move on. Oh, this is going to be a good one. Don't self-promote. be truthful. We get told that you need to build your own brand, right? So why not self-promote?
I think the word like self-promote almost there's a meaning implied in it is this over-exaggeration in the
Okay.
self-promotion. And then with a culture of like humility that comes into it, that really sits uncomfortably. And I rather lean on the value of being truthful.
Okay.
Right? So tell the things that are progressing as well as the things that has been achieved.
Right. Okay.
As well as also be truthful about the challenges. So I went through that stage of I don't feel right to self-promote, but I'm okay to be truthful. So I will tell like truthfully what has been achieved, what has been delivered. Because I'm also having a bit of like empathy. I don't expect my boss to know everything that I've done.
That's
It's
right.
impossible. And it's that empathy and that perspective taking that I go, I just need to be truthful.
Yeah.
And even truthful on the things that are not going well.
Well, yeah.
Not to say that, and that does have to overcome a little bit of that fear of being judged as incompetent.
Yeah.
It's about saying, hey, these are the barriers or the roadblocks or the challenges. And I actually need your help to do whatever. Or these are the barriers. This is what me and the team are doing to overcome that barrier. That part was definitely a lot harder to do because you're already like, oh, you're not self-promoting.
Yep.
So you're not over-exaggerating. But then you also have to overcome this fear of being viewed as incompetent when you raise issue.
Yeah.
But I really had to learn that lesson as well about being truthful was because my boss would say, hey, you're telling me all the stuff that's going well, but I don't hear all the bad stuff. So at the back of my mind, I'm like, is there stuff that is going on that I really should know? And that was a piece of learning to be truthful.
Yeah, understood. And this is particularly important for the Asian culture because humility is at the forefront of that culture. And you don't want to be bragging, you don't want to be talking about yourself, but at the same time, if you're not truthful and if you're not communicating things that they are, then unfortunately, I don't think the situation will be optimal. You will not achieve the results that you would desire. And that's why it's important to do that. But I think that mindset shift from being self-promoting to being truthful, I think is a very powerful one and a very practical one that we can all employ.
Yeah, and also I'm also thinking that I have to be truthful for my team.
Yep.
If I don't tell what the team has achieved or delivered, then I'm not being truthful for their work.
That's right. And you need to promote, as a leader, you need to be able to promote their achievements as well.
Yeah, because then they'll be like, oh, okay. And for them, they'll be like, why are we working so hard if Koon is not going to be truthful about how much we have put in and the impact that we have delivered? So it's also for me to be truthful for them. And only through that will you then be able to get more resources, more trust to do more exciting, interesting stuff.
That's right.
So don't compete on self-promotion, compete on being truthful.
Yeah. And that's just what good leadership should be.
Yeah.
All right, lesson number 9. Don't work hard, work smart. This is very un-Asian of you.
Yes, because the more senior that you get to, everybody is working hard, right? There's very few senior leaders that don't work hard. So you cannot win by simply working hard. You got to shift into working smart. You're still expected to deliver that output and more. But how can you actually figure a way out to work smarter? Whether that is, and so I like to use that principle of every 1 unit of my effort, I need to see 10 times the impact, right? And so if I'm going to spend time in that meeting, I need to know that because by investing my time in that meeting, there will be 10 times the impact because it's an important meeting that I need to dedicate my time to. It will then spread to other people from a change or implementation point of view, right? Equally, working smart is also about removing things rather than keep adding. So a lot of people keep adding more and more and more and more.
As in like to
Take on more and
take
more.
on more, yeah. But you're talking about being more focused.
Being more focused and very disciplined about what you remove. You have to be as good as removing as you are adding.
Gotcha. Yeah.
When you add is the add of that is going to create more value, hence that 10 times.
That's right.
But you need to be also disciplined to remove.
If it's not adding any value, you need to get rid of.
And if you're not the right person for it, you got to think about giving it to your team or other people to go and do it. One of the frameworks that we have used is there's a 5 pillars, right? One of the first pillar is eliminate. So in transformation, before you do anything, your first thing is you need to work out what you need to eliminate.
Yep.
Otherwise, garbage in, garbage out. Same thing. It's you got to start to eliminate first. Remove certain meetings, remove certain reports, remove certain things that you don't need to do anymore.
Yep.
Then you prioritize what is really important. Not about working harder, working smarter. Yeah.
That's a great lesson. Thanks for that. And finally, and I like this one because it's about money. Don't work for money. You should make your money work for you.
Yes.
All right.
This was something that I was at this conference and this person, I'm very thankful to that person. He said most people work hard to earn the money so that they can be happy. But the person said like most people don't know what makes them happy.
That's true.
So they work really hard to chase after this money, so to get to this imaginary like happy. And he said that you got to work out first what makes you happy, then quantify the money
That's required.
that is required to make you happy. Then you know how much you need to work, how hard you need to work
Yeah, to get there.
to get there. Because if you realize that what's going to make you happy actually doesn't cost a lot of money,
Yeah.
then why are you working so hard? Because you are sacrificing what actually makes you happy for a less happy life.
That's true.
So that really shifted my perspective around, okay, so there's 3 types of independence that is going to make me happy, right? Financially independent.
Yep.
That means I'm not depending on the salary anymore.
It's a freedom.
It's the freedom, right, to do what I want with my time. So that means not relying on an income, but building up passive income.
Yep.
And therefore, I need to know what is that passive income that is going to support my happy life.
That's right.
Because then that will give me career independence, choosing the kind of work that I want to do, not because I have to, but because that's a career that I want to do. And with that, which is also very important, is to build emotional independence, meaning your validation.
Yeah, you don't need your work to be who you are.
You don't need the work, and you don't need other people to validate you. You don't need that external validation. The only validation that really matters is your own validation. And that's what I call emotional independence. My happiness is not dependent on how you feel about me.
Yeah. It's crazy how much people actually rely on that or care about that.
Yeah. And then all 3 are like joined. It's not like you do one, then is the other. Definitely, yes. Financial independence and emotional independence is that journey to get to that career independence. But that emotional independence is what I see. Yes, you need to put in the work for it. So have the money work for you rather than you work for the money.
And that's a big mindset shift. Yeah, love it. Love it. This is why I knew we need to talk and get you to share your 10 lessons, and you did not disappoint. It was 10 lessons unlearned. So I can't actually ask you now, what have you unlearned that you always thought to be the case? But no, that's been a whole lot of fun. And quite frankly, I really like the idea. Like you pack some pretty complex concepts in there, but in a very simple manner. I think some of that I'll be pondering over and stewing over. But thank you so much for joining us. And we will finish on that note.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
It's been absolutely wonderful having you. You've been listening to 10 Lessons Learned, the podcast that makes the world a little wiser, lesson by lesson. We're joined today by our special guest and friend, Koon, executive coach. And we'd like to thank our 10 Lessons team that makes our show possible. Our episode editor, Cody Como, marketing and social media manager, Wang, and our producer, Robert Hostry, supported as always by the Professional Development Forum. Don't forget to leave us a review or comment. You can email us at podcast@10lessonslearned.com. That's podcast at number 10lessonslearned.com. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss an episode of the only podcast that makes the world a little wiser, lesson by lesson. Thanks for tuning in and stay safe, everyone.